Dearly beloved students, faculty and alumni, I am Ardian Kasaniku, the president of Foreign Affairs and Diplomacy Club, and we are gathered here today to discuss the hot topic of territorial exchange between Republic of Kosovo and Republic of Serbia. Is Kosovo going to give the northern part of the country to our neighbor Serbia in exchange with Prešev, Medvej, and Bujanovac, or is it just a correction of borders as our president of our country, Hashim Thaci, states? What are the pros and cons on the topic? Who will benefit more? Is this just a fraud to manipulate the population of Kosovo? These and many more questions are going to be further discussed on our open forum with our dearly beloved professors Mark Baskin, Professor Chad Briggs, Professor Mentar Nimani, and Professor Besnik Bislimi. Each of the professors are going to proceed with an opening statement, continuing with their refutations. After that, we're going to have a question-answer session between them and you. And finally, professors are going to give their closing statements. Without further ado, I would like to pass the word to our Professor Mark Baskin. Thank you very much for your attention.
So who's got the thing that says, 2 minutes, 1 minute? Oh, no, not this one. So, so as I look at the media survey today from the UN, what I see is that A, the Assembly failed to adopt a resolution on the dialogue. B, Prime Minister Haradinaj said, let us be unified for the dialogue, the same that we are for the KSF. C, Speaker of the Parliament, Mr. Vaseli said that Thaci will respect the Assembly's resolution, whatever comes out, and that President Thaci himself in Belarus said that there needs to be an agreement on mutual recognition and peace. And as you look at the media, every day there's something on this. It's the same. There's a lot of public statements. People are fighting with each other, very critical statements. And if you follow the Serbian press as well, there's the same kind of things going on. Whereas a formerly liberal foreign minister who's very anti-Kosovo says really horrible things about the president of Serbia. And these statements that I see from the opposition in both places are full of fear of moving forward. And while those in the governments are incredibly optimistic about how things are going to go. So that's just how I see it. And I have to say that nowhere, whether this is domestic or international source, have I seen a particularly, I think, interesting and useful analysis of the situation as it is. I just really haven't, it just hasn't come my way. There have been some interesting and provocative pieces about this and that, but there's nothing that kind of gets inside that I've seen. And so we're stuck listening and fighting over these really kind of very sexy phrases, border swaps, partition, border correction, and all these kinds of things. And it seems to me that they're very unhelpful in the sense that it raises the level of heat that is fighting over light. And so I just want to conclude by making several points, which is that A, the conflict really is frozen. There appears to be an inverse relationship between the amount of noise that you hear in the public media and any kind of progress on the dialogue. And the goal is some kind of sustainable peace between two neighbors, and this is not an easy task. The process is frozen. That is, past agreements go unimplemented by both sides, and this and that. There's a lot of mutual blaming. Political leaders on both sides play to kind of core political constituencies as a way of whipping up kind of enthusiasm for themselves as a political leader. And there's a lot of jockeying for positions, and it's kind of like if you were following sports, they're kind of training for this final match, the championship. So, but in fact, what you have is that there's an incredibly small amount of contact between the two sides at almost all levels, at the leadership level, at the mid-level, and down below. And there are many times that it would seem to me that a staffer from the Kosovo Assembly should be in contact with a staffer from the Assembly of Serbia how do you deal with this particular issue? Nothing about, but there is none of that contact. And so there's this issue of framing that I would say that it's being framed as an exchange of borders, but what you're really talking about is a peace agreement between Kosovo and Serbia. You're not talking about an exchange of borders. You're talking about a peace agreement. And it's an agreement that's going to be quite complicated. And as I said, a couple weeks ago when we had a forum that was similar, the Dayton Agreement has 11 articles and 11 annexes. It's 58 pages. So we're not talking about, is it Preševo for Gazivoda or whatever the thing is. You're simply not talking about that. And so what you're talking about is an agreement that will involve the great powers, and not just the EU. I mean, it will involve the EU, but at the end of the day, there are many, many obstacles that stand in the way to some kind of normalization of relations, and that countries that will, like Russia, even possibly China, even possibly Turkey, will have to be somehow involved in different aspects of whatever peace agreement. I'm not talking about a border swap, I'm talking about a peace agreement. So that's my position. Thanks.
No, I'd have to get up. One quick story and then two quick points. I'll try to be short to make room for my beloved colleagues. When the first NATO expansion occurred and they were negotiating with countries like Hungary on how to get into NATO, the United States, because I want to take an external view of things here, the United States basically came to Hungary and said, look, if you start talking about Transylvania, if you start talking about anything that happened with territory before the Treaty of Trianon in 1919, we are walking out of this door and you are frozen out of these negotiations. You do not talk about it, okay? And that was always the sort of external view of things, that if things had happened in the past, if you want to talk about territorial swaps, if you want to start bringing that into negotiations, it's just done. And it was perhaps the one time in which US lack of historical memory was perhaps positive. And I'm very sensitive to and compassionate with Hungarians, but not in that case. The reason for this, and with apologies to Professor Nemani for pretending like I'm a lawyer for a second. In international law, there's a concept called usi possidetis, which essentially means that borders are drawn according to their former administrative borders and territories. And if you were a new country trying to assert your independence, if you're decolonizing from a former imperial power, if you were a former Soviet republic, it means that your borders are established according to whatever was there already. If there was an administrative border that decided this is where Kosovo is, if there was another border that said this is Ukraine, that's your border. Doesn't matter if it's inconvenient, doesn't matter if there are ethnic groups that are on the wrong side, that's what it is. This goes back to the 19th century when Spain started pulling out of South America, and there was a very real reason for this. They didn't want other countries to come in and then start taking advantage of what was happening. They didn't want creeping borders. They didn't want countries to keep negotiating with one another, and where you would have constant changes within borders. And this was reified by the International Court in 1986 with a case called Burkina Faso versus Mali. So when, in the Ukrainian case, for example, when Russia takes over Crimea, and Russia keeps complaining that this is something that is akin to Kosovo. It's not the same. Kosovo was always an administrative unit within Yugoslavia. So when Yugoslavia fell apart, it made sense that Kosovo should remain this territory. What happened with Crimea, it doesn't matter if Crimea had Russian-speaking people, it didn't matter if Crimea was originally given by one of the Soviet leaders to Ukraine. What mattered was that at the point at which Ukraine declared its independence in 1991, Crimea was part of Ukraine. And that meant that that was the international border. And there was no excuse for Russia then to come in. So the second point then is that the international view of things is that the US would not want to see things change. However, there are new people in the White House, including someone named John Bolton, who is perhaps the only person in Washington who doesn't like Kosovo. And the line that they're pushing, whether it's John Bolton or people at the Cato Institute, like Carpenter, they're pushing a Russian line. This does not come from the United States. This comes from Russia. And Russia's interest in this region is to increase instability. to foment divisions in this sort of soft part of Europe, and by soft I mean sort of NATO's flank, you know, the place that could be made more unstable. It helps them if there's a renegotiation, because then they have a better claim for Crimea and for what happens in Donetsk and Luhansk in eastern Ukraine. It helps them because it helps to increase divisions, not just in Kosovo and Serbia, but also in Bosnia. And it gives them greater argument to say, well, okay, if you're going to redraw your border, then why don't we do that in Bosnia? Why don't we do it in Montenegro? Why don't we do it in all these other places too? And finally, I'll just say, being very cynical, if Kosovo agrees to this, say that there is some sort of agreement between Kosovo and Serbia, then it's entirely possible that, I mean, Kosovo isn't going to get Serbia to agree, okay, now we'll support your UN membership, now we'll formally agree to you. They could instead turn around and say, you know, by international law, you weren't supposed to have done that. You just proved to yourself that you are still part of Serbia, because the only times we redraw borders are within countries, not between countries. So just keep that in mind, because I don't want to see Kosovo plagued. I don't know the internal politics in Kosovo very well to explain why Taci is doing this or why it's even come up in the assembly. But just be cautious, because there are people outside of Kosovo who are pushing this and who do not necessarily have the best interests of the country in mind. Thank you.
Hello. The borders of Kosovo are non-negotiable. "30 years since the installment of the apartheid system in Kosovo. 20 years since the genocide and ethnic cleansing and eventually freedom, the small f. 10 years since the Declaration of Independence. What do we see? People waiting in Prizren to go to Germany, to leave the country. Clearly, there is something rotten in the land of Kosovo. So, we have a complete collapse of the state system, social system, governmental system that needs to be changed. So therefore, the proposition that I come here is to change this system. And to change this system, it needs radical and drastic measures. And radical and drastic measures is the people to take over, right? Therefore, the negotiations can be held only if the state of Kosovo is strong, developed, technically advantageous, strong in the military aspect also, strong in the diplomatic aspect also, so that they could use all the historical background and all the historical baggage in the future relationship with other states, including the neighboring state. So therefore, this is my first attempted idea of how to solve the problem, that in order to have successful solution of the border, first we need to be a strong state. First we need to be a smart state. And first we need to have people who participated in this process. Thank you very much.
Okay. So all of them are public policy professors but talk like politicians. I am a politician but without that skill, so completely unable to talk as a politician.
I agree with you.
Yes. And actually, if I could understand something from what they say, it is that they are against territorial exchange. So this was the common conclusion. I will say only that sovereign states can negotiate about the exchange of territories. So once this step has been finalized, so both sides recognize the other side as a sovereign state, if there are such proposals, then two sovereign states can sit and discuss those eventual proposals. In this situation, actually we don't know exactly whose proposal was to start with exchange of the territories. Thought pretends that it is his own original idea. First, nobody believes that theory, not even members of the PDK, and probably they know his capacity is better than we do, so they know that he's not able of generating original ideas. So then the question is, where is the origin? And people from PDK say that the origin is in Serbia and Russia. So it's not smart if your leader comes to Kosovo and says, well, I support and promote the ideas that come from the other side. So it's not necessarily smart. But I'm not going to the motives that are driving thoughts in this, whether there is a pressure from a special court, whether there is a tendency to win the Nobel Prize for peace, I don't know, but let me see how Thoci is selling his idea to us. His first point is that without an agreement, there is no recognition. If you want to be recognized from Serbia, which means then break the isolation and start the process of integration, we need to give something to Serbia. Second, if we agree on this resolution, then our doors will be open. The 5 countries of EU will recognize us immediately, and we will become member of EU. Pretty much Thoci is making promises on behalf of Russia, Spain, Cyprus. On the same time, when Spain says it doesn't matter what the agreement between Kosovo and Serbia is, we will not recognize, because our failure to recognize has nothing to do with Serbia, but has to do with the internal problems that they have. So pretty much, it's a promise without anything that backs that promise. So it's like the proposal that we had, or the promise that if we vote for the demarcation with Montenegro, in 1 month we will get the visa liberalization. Then we were told every month, oh, in June you will get the visa liberalization. Then the Minister of European Integration every day came on TV and said, in November you will get the visa liberalization, in December you will get the visa liberalization. No, she says, we don't know because we don't decide. Okay. Pretty much Thoci is telling this. The agreement, exchange of territories, is what I offer. If you don't want this, you will get something much worse, which is the association. And I don't belong to those that want something bad for Kosovo like association. Forgetting that actually he signed the association, and he was the person that tried to convince us that association is the best instrument towards Kosovo's integration. And then the Constitutional Court said, well, wait a minute, this violates in only 3 pages you managed to violate the Constitution 23 times. So there is something wrong. So I know Thoci realized that actually what he did, he destroyed the functionality of the state, says, oh, it's so bad what I did that I'm even willing to give up territory just to save you from the association. Mm-hmm. Another thing that he's promising is, I want Preševo, Bujanovac, and Medveđa, but I will not give anything. So, but when you ask them, what about Ljeposavić, Zubin Potok, and others, they say, no, I don't want to mention them. But pretty much people that are more involved in politics know how the agreement looks like. We are actually even afraid that he has already signed something there. And when we ask them, do you mean all Preševo and Bujanovac? Of course not. We only mean until the highway, which is pretty much half of Preševo, half of Bujanovac. So, and when you ask about criteria, what is the criteria? Is the number of citizens criteria? The ethnic structure of the population? Is it the quality of the territory, whether natural resources there? Nobody knows what criteria will be used. The next promise that they are making is that this will be an isolated solution. Kosovo and Serbia can do this. This is sui generis. No other countries can replicate the model. But what is the guarantee that Thoci can offer? So Thoci now behaves like the head of UN and says, well, we can do this, but Macedonia and Albania cannot do this. Macedonia and Bulgaria cannot talk of exchanges. Bosnia and Herzegovina and Croatia cannot talk on this. Pretty much you see that the idea has started, was not prepared at all, but he's still promoting. He's promoting the idea even after he was told from all parties in Kosovo that they will not support it. Even after we told the EU, don't support Thoci because he doesn't even have a mandate to negotiate. He pretends that He get the mandate from the Constitution because he's the president of the country. And as a president, he represents the country outside. It's completely other thing to be able to represent the country and to lead the negotiations. If Tachi really thinks that all the competencies for representing the country abroad belong to the president, then we don't need embassies at all. We don't need the Minister of Foreign Affairs. We don't need the Minister of European Integration. We assign all these duties to the president, and he leads the process. Presidents only sign these agreements, but somebody else negotiates them and makes the final proposal. Anyway, pretty much we have a consensus. Nobody wants this on both sides. It means European Union already knows that even if they support that agreement, it will not be rectified neither in Kosovo or in Serbia. That's why I think Tachi is stepping back right now. Okay, that will be for the beginning.
Okay, we heard the ideas of our professors, which were framing Russia's indication on instability in the region, revolution, and no way of exchanging or correcting the territories, because states first have to be sovereign in order to have the dialogue in the first place. Now, I'm going to give the word to our beloved professors again, if they have anything to refute each other or give us further information.
I don't even really need this. You can probably hear me even without it. Let me say that I'm not sure best thing, with all due respect, and my respect for you knows no bounds. I'm not sure I actually made that statement that I opposed. What I'm saying is that it's not a discussion about border changes. It's really a discussion about peace, and that to do this properly, you're going to need to include, it's going to take place on many levels, and you're going to have to bring in Russia. I mean, Russia, because at the end of the day, Russia holds the key to membership in the UN. And so that, and it would be wonderful to say, we don't like the Russians, they're awful, and we may all agree on that. So if they're so awful and we don't like them, then why don't we just get rid of them? And the answer is that we're not capable of getting rid of them. They are, in fact, a fact of life. So as long as they're a fact of life, then you have to take them into consideration, just like so much else in this process, that you have to take into consideration the problems and the situation that's facing Kosovo. And, you know, I think where we all four would, I think, agree is that we would all love it if within a year or two, Kosovo would be a member of the UN, that there would be perhaps some kind of mutual recognition between Serbia and Kosovo, and all those things. But in order to do it, it's you can't just get it because you think you're right. And so the question is what do you do in order to achieve those objectives? And so I could go on, and I would say that the one thing that I'm waiting for is some kind of outside-the-box new initiative that would unfreeze what I see as a very frozen process. And I'm not quite sure what that is, and I know that it's not simply going to be a dialogue between two guys. It's going to in fact be a much more complicated set of processes, and so that's what I would say is going forward. That's all. I mean, I could go on, but
No, we don't want you to go on.
Oh no! I mean, you know, and okay, yeah. The one other point that I meant to make last time and that I haven't made, that when I was speaking initially or now, is simply that and especially for you, I mean, young people. I see many of our recent graduates who are here. It's great to see you back and all that, and not to mention our friend from just south of the border. Part of the caravan coming up invading Kosovo. Is that what is really incumbent upon the people of Kosovo, people that work for the government, people that work outside the government, is developing the capacity to implement whatever agreement that there is. is that that the government needs to work as effectively as it can, and to, as Mentor was saying, essentially, that was one of the points that you made, and I would agree completely. So I would just underline the point that Mentor made, which is revolution.
The problem is not international community. The problem is us, Kosovo. The Americans have done everything they can possibly do to help us, to help ourselves. And what did we do instead? We completely wasted the window of opportunity. We could have made the biggest, strongest, the most powerful center in the Balkans. From this point, we would speak with the former enemies from the strength, not from the weak point. So now we are at the weak point. And in the weak point, we have to give everything possible. So that's why, because we are in the weak point, the politicians talk about the borders instead of talking about development, fighting poverty, fighting crime, fighting for people who are disappeared almost 20 years, fighting for the future of the youth. So therefore, we need to be stronger, not be in a status of we'll give everything, just leave us okay, leave us like we are. So that's the point that I wanted to make. Maybe you want to continue. Thank you.
When we all finish, then we have...
No, please go to questions. Most of these students hear me talk way too often.
I don't think I'll do it.
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. I actually fully agree. Kosovo really needs a change in the whole system of everything here. But the thing is that, I fully agree on that. But the thing is that things have happened. We are in this position now. 20 years have passed since the war, 10 years of independence. Kosovo is weak. That's a fact that we have to face. And I agree that changes have to be made, but postponing the current situation and maintaining probably status quo in order to make these changes, which are not going to happen for sure, because we know that the revolution is very unlikely and hard to happen, difficult to happen. Considering these things, it is hard to not face these hard decisions, such as the agreement between Kosovo and Serbia, as Professor Baskin said, the peace agreement, which is presumably a peace agreement, which probably is going to end up in a swap of territories or a modification of the borders. So, like a good researcher, Mr. Florian Cehoia made a very good point, which I liked. It's that the Serbian propaganda on the international community is that they are changing the facts. They are making us the bad guys. And new people in politics actually believe that. And this change of the situation in the international system actually, let's say, puts us at a disadvantage. And considering these changes in the system, how can we postpone this situation? How can we, let's say, try to make a revolution without dealing with these essentials first? Because this agreement is going to be essential for the statehood of Kosovo at first, because we still have the resolution 1244 in power, and that's not particularly good for us. So I would just want to bring this point to the table and just hear a discussion on this issue. Thank you.
Well, first, I think we have to be too naive to believe that it is about a peace agreement with Serbia. It's not Serbia that wants peace with Kosovo. They need an agreement so that they can speed the process towards EU integration, but at the same time, they guarantee that they will continue to destabilize Kosovo. So if your aim is to achieve peace, then you also behave in that new strategy. Serbia says, well, my goal will be to motivate more and more countries to withdraw the recognition of Kosovo. My goal is to make the country dysfunctional by imposing a new layer of the government. My goal is to prevent Kosovo from becoming a member of international associations. But in the same time, we want peace agreement. Makes no sense. But you see that the main request from Serbia is coming for two reasons. There is an Article 35 on the way to EU integration, and second, they anticipate that internationally there is a healthy moment for them to become more aggressive. Or maybe the new political elite in some countries around the world, powerful countries, is more in favor of their goals, so let's push for this moment. But at the same time, if Serbia thinks that it's the right moment for them to handle, it means that it's not the right moment for us to handle. So if Serbia is rushing, maybe we should see how we can slow the process and wait for some changes to happen. So that's why if in one of the public statements made by Vučić, he said, well, if Kosovo thinks that we will get tired, they're wrong. Actually, in these negotiations, the key question is who will get tired earlier. There is a document published in Serbia by Open Society Foundation, actually, which proves that Serbia will get tired first and very soon. That's why they're pushing for this agreement. If they don't manage to speed the process towards EU integration, this lack of success will speed the process of youth emigration from Serbia, and this will completely change the demographic trends in Serbia. They are afraid that by 2050, they will lose 20% of the population and healthiest part of the population. And the country will be completely incompetitive internationally. We don't have that big problem. We are used to live in poor conditions. We feel comfortable. The fact that we tolerate this government means that we can handle these pure policies. So that's why, in my view, if Serbia is rushing, it means they don't have the bargaining power, only that we don't realize this. And we don't realize because we have completely incompetent elites that represent our goals internationally or our policies.
I don't agree that the poverty is a natural state of the people in Kosovo. Actually, that's an abnormal state. And that the contribution toward that state is both from the position and the opposition. Therefore, both of them have to change, especially the opposition. The opposition should start creating new institutions that will involve everyone to participate to strengthen the state. I'm not talking about strengthening the position of Serbia, I'm talking about strengthening the position of Kosovo. And without that, we will wait for the Russian military base to be open in Veternik. Thank you.
What was the last sentence?
Without being strong in Kosovo, we will negotiate with the Russians about opening a military base in Veternik, like they did in Niš. Yeah, it could be in Veternik, could be Hajvali, could be anywhere. But there will be a military base of Russia.
Very well.
Hello?
Just very briefly, because it's a point I thought Professor Besnik would make, and I was surprised that he didn't. There was a journalist who traveled to Serbia from, I think it was Germany, and was asking some Albanians, well, what do you really care about this? I mean, would you feel better if you're part of Kosovo? And they looked around and basically said, actually, we really don't care where the border is. We care that we don't have jobs, that these communities have nothing. And that should be the focus, right? And that's the sort of warning that I think Mentor is giving as well, that these are political sleights of hand, right? That they're saying, oh, look at these other people, don't look at our problems, right? And the warning comes actually from Canada, of all places. In the 20th century, Quebec, as part of its separatist movement, decided that they were going to focus on independence for Quebec as a territory. And in the process, they forgot about all the other French Canadians that were living in Canada, particularly the smaller provinces like New Brunswick, right? So this is not, even if you were a Serb living in Kosovo, this would not be a good plan, because it would mean that Serbia is basically giving up on you and the Kosovo government would be giving up on you. That if you're in a mixed community like Kamenica, or if you're in somewhere else in southern Kosovo, well, you're on your own now, you know, and the politics there will get even worse.
We have stated this in several locations that there cannot be exchange of territories without a maybe peaceful ethnic cleansing. So, and if this is the outcome, then the question is whether it's worth. And by the way, the political elites in Preševo and Bujanovac are stating several times, yes, we want to be part of Kosovo, but we want this because we feel that we belong to Kosovo, but we don't want Kosovo to pay for us with its own territory. So it's not that, because if we think, well, we want Preševo and Bujanovac, we're willing to give up something, it means actually we don't think they're part of us. We want to purchase them, so we're trading now. And this is actually what hurts them. Another problem is that they believe now, more like us, that Thoci is merely misusing them in the process, but the intention is never to really bring these territories into within the borders of Kosovo. But if this process then ends up with a disappointment of Albanians living in Preševo and Bujanovac, it could lead to a massive move of people. So it's another risk, potential risk. And this could then definitely change the ethnic structure, which then gives a high motive to Serbia to say, well, these are not Albanian territories anymore.
Hello, professors. If you said that slowing down the process could actually work, why don't they put the president into the constitutional court and maybe things would change? Because there are parties in the government that they oppose the process of territorial exchange in this case.
Question is for me.
Yes.
Well, you cannot simply say, I want to send somebody to the constitutional court. First, there are clear rules who can send issues to the constitutional court and why. President Thoci must do something concretely that you think it's in the violation of constitution, and then take that, send to the constitutional court. He officially has not signed anything yet. So there are only two reasons why we could send him to the constitution. We could say, well, he's mentally ill. Well, we could do this. We could say, well, build a committee that wants to prove whether he's mentally healthy or not. He refuses to come, probably, and then the doctor says, well, even the fact that he refused to come is an indicator that he is not healthy. Send him to the constitution. Or the second, he says, well, he's violating his role as a unifying institution for the nation. So because he's clearly opposing to all political parties. But still, there is not a strong harmony within the political parties and the parliament to take that step. And we see that resolutions or these decisions simply are not stopping Thoci.
Hello. Professor, as we know, our statehood is contested in the international instances. 5 of the EU states don't recognize us. I'm going to make a hypothetical question. If this agreement would secure us full US membership, not as an UN, sorry. US, we love US. A UN membership, full UN membership, not as an observing country like, what's the name of, close to Israel, Palestine, yeah. Would this make the agreement acceptable for you, given that that would imply that Kosovo statehood would not be contested anymore? Do you know what I mean? Whichever one.
I'm just going to say, because that's a very reductionist kind of question in a way. I know, I understand.
One more thing, because I think there are words, just spreading words. I'm not saying they are fact, but and actually I think Mr. Fauci said in an interview that he will not make the agreement without an assurance that Kosovo will become a full member of the UN. Therefore, I think this agreement would be beneficial for Kosovo if we would have a secure place in the UN as a full member with all the rights.
So let me just say, just to answer this one question, is that it's the process of reaching an agreement is not going to be between two young guys. You know what I mean? It's not going to be Thaci and Vucic cutting a deal. I'm saying is that you're looking at a much longer process. You're looking at a process that takes place at different levels. You're looking at bringing in other actors, and you're looking at two negotiating teams that have maximum and minimum and medium positions, and in the end, nobody's going to be happy. That's just the way it is. When you're looking at a peace agreement where one side hasn't beaten the other side, I mean clearly, unequivocally beaten the other side, no one is happy. And so whatever happens here, nobody will be happy. And I'll just say, I have some other things to say later, but just to say.
But this is clearly contradictory. We want to negotiate with Serbia because we want to make both sides happier and end up with a resolution that makes us both less happier.
No, but what I mean,
Then
when I say this, I say that to achieve certain objectives that you consider to be crucial, you'll have to give up things. And I'm not quite sure what those things are. Serbia will have to give up things, and Kosovo, in the end, will have to give up things. And so, whether it's territory or whatever it is, I don't know. But I'm just saying that in the end, the deal, you'll get some things that you really want, and you'll probably have to give away something. Listen, if you clearly won, then you wouldn't have to be dealing with this situation. In 1945, it was clear who won and who lost. It was clear who won and who lost. And so it was clear what was going to happen to Germany, et cetera. Not entirely clear, but it was clear at least where 3/4 of Germany was going to be.
Even the Soviets won.
Yeah. Well, I'm just saying.
Just briefly, there's no guarantee, right? I mean, just to expand on what Mark said, it's not it.
I said if we.
But that can't happen, right? Because it wouldn't be Serbia guaranteeing that for.
Said that he's not going to accept the agreement unless we get a seat in the UN. How does he guarantee?
But no one can guarantee that, right? Because like Mark said before, it's not up to Serbia, right? Because if Russia doesn't want it, if there's still EU members who don't want it, regardless of what happens between Kosovo and Serbia, and who knows what the U.S. is doing right now.
I would add that, I mean, presumably a process that takes place that leads to some kind of agreement between Serbia and Kosovo would begin to look at and diffuse the opposition from Spain is the most serious opposition within Europe and even Russia, and there may be some deals which nobody likes that will be done as part of this process.
But one thing I'll say is that countries like Spain and Greece don't want Kosovo to even talk about this because they want the territories to remain as they are and the borders to remain as they are. They do not want this even to be discussed because I mean, especially Macedonia and Greece right now, they want to settle their own issues. They don't want new issues to be brought up just to the north of them.
Shall I answer also?
Yeah, answer for all of us. I did.
If you are asking about selling out, well, never Kosovo should sell its own territory, even if it means that you will never be a member of the United Nations. It's much more important to have a strong state, and then when the markets is up, not like it is now down, you can negotiate what can we exchange. The market will probably be out of the question, but the exchange will be into something else. Thank you.
I would like this question to not be recorded, but however. We know that actually Fauci is using all of this international presence right now because we know that US was against border correction before John Bolton actually came in. We know the same about the France. But why on earth Germany is so against the border correction? And actually President Fauci is just destroying our relationship with Germany. And it's using the fact that John Bolton is there in the United States, that even the France is pro-Serbs, and that whole international community is supporting him personally. And I don't know what the interest of the United States and France in the border changing, because they're literally supporting that. And the second question is, if we all know that actually President Fauci is all doing this in personal interest, how on earth do we actually get rid of him? Except for assassination, except for that one. How? Because Professor...
Maybe we can exchange thoughts with Preshevo and Medvedev.
Let me start by asking or answering the U.S. question. The U.S. has always been, like I said, the U.S. doesn't have a very long historical memory, so they don't like changing borders. I mean, the U.S. has done it itself, but that's different, right? The shift in the White House, I mean, you have in Trump someone who doesn't even know where Kosovo is, and doesn't understand even how the U.S. Constitution works, let alone international law. So, and he has these secret meetings with Putin in Helsinki, right? And afterwards, then RT, like Russia Today and Sputnik, start floating these discussions. And whether they happened or not, no one can deny them, right? So they start floating these ideas that basically Trump just sold out Kosovo and said, yeah, okay, we'll just agree to this. We agreed to this with Putin. Partly it's being pushed by Bolton, who I don't understand his motivations, right? But if you have a White House that wants to be friendly with Russia, and these ideas originally came from Russia, you know, they started in 2015, and largely it was in reaction to what happened in Ukraine, and they just buy into them very easily. Most Americans don't know. They don't know enough about, and this is not just Americans. Most people don't understand Kosovo geography. They don't understand this is really complicated ethnic geography. You know, the Serbs don't all live in Mitrovica, right? And most of the Orthodox Serbs live in the south, or they live in Dečan, or you know, in the small villages like Prekovac. They don't understand how difficult that really is, and that you'll end up, as Bismik said, with this sort of ethnic cleansing. You know, they'll end up being thrown out in some way. As for Germany, the EU just doesn't, like I said, the EU just doesn't want this to be on the table at all. And I personally don't think this helps the EU move towards even visa liberalization, talking about this, because it makes some of the EU members very, very nervous. And it's not part of the criteria, right? Because Spain, not just Spain, France, Germany, anyone, they don't care about the border delineations, right? They just want things to be settled. And so this is just opening a new can of worms, and it's something else to negotiate, rather than being part of the long list of things that Kosovo should do to get its visa liberalization.
Okay, briefly, three things. You said Fauci is destroying our relationships with Germany. That's not happening, because Germany knows the position of Fauci, and Germany knows that Fauci is not representing the citizens of Kosovo anymore. As for the position of United States, Palmer was here last week, and two messages are important from his visit. The first message is that the idea for border correction doesn't come from us. So it's not a US-supported idea. And the second message is, we will not support any agreement that you bring us on the table, which means Fauci has excluded us from the negotiations. So this is strong, because if he says, we are waiting for you to bring us the agreement, he's accepting that Fauci doesn't want them to be part of the process. Practically they said, you are not problematic guys, let us reach an agreement, so don't intervene. The third message is that, or the third thing that I want to say is that the idea doesn't have the support of EU. But unfortunately, it has the support of some key individuals currently within the EU. You have elections next year in EU, and people like Mogherini need to present a big success. So if you find an out-of-the-box solution that solves the century-long conflict in Kosovo, this could be a huge addition to her CV for the SU. But I think it's not her job to fill the CV of Mogherini, so that's why probably there will be no agreement before the next elections in the EU.
So, I have to go teach in a minute, so I'm going to say one more thing, and then I'm going to leave, which is we've been mixing a discussion, and from a point of view of political science or public policy, we've been talking about international relations. We've also been talking about sort of domestic politics or comparative politics, and we've been mixing them together as often takes place, in fact, and there's been theoretical approaches to how to do that. And I would say that there's often the case that a lot of people don't like the president, and so they're thinking it's a bad idea. He's here. This is the argument you often hear, that he's, saving his hide. He wants a Nobel Peace Prize, all these kinds of things, and so therefore it's a bad idea. I think that what the people of Kosovo need to do is they need to think through, are they willing to wait a year, 2 years, 3 years, 5 years, 10 years, 20 years in the current situation? Because at the end of the day, stars will come together or not come together. Let me just remind you, in 1999, 2000, following the Oslo process, we were this close to cutting a deal between the Palestinian Authority and the government of Israel. And in the end, Mr. Arafat said no. That was 19 years ago. And it's fair to say that they are farther away than ever of a settlement, and that the people in Palestine are, in many respects, living much worse, except for, of course, the elites, who are doing quite well. And so I just think that, I just use that as just one example, that things come together, things aren't in the control of your government, of the government that's being run by the current leadership, or a potential government being run by, say, other leaders. It's not going to be in their control, that you need to be talking. It's about, I used to say, conflict resolution is about getting along with people you hate. And so that's really what we're talking about. So that's my final comment on that.
We have one more last question, and we have to close this session. I'm sorry.
So, a wise man once said, there are 3 causes to explain each political phenomenon. The first cause is called the effective cause, the second cause is called the material cause, and the third cause is called the underneath structural cause. So what I hear until now, I heard about material and effective causes, but I didn't get quite well the third cause. Knowing well that US currently is pursuing a offshore balancing foreign policy, what is the impact of external factors, respectively the US foreign policy trend on one hand, and on the other hand the impact that we can have as a government?
Let me just say that the U.S., Chad alluded to this. I'm not sure he'll agree with what I'm about to say.
I'll wait till you leave and then.
I'm not sure he'll agree, but I can say that the U.S. is decreasingly a factor. I mean, what the Trump administration has done, as it says, that we don't need to, we're not interested in global leadership. And that he has said that very openly and very clearly. That, he just wants to make, we can impute all kinds of bad motives to him, and most of which are true. But what he is saying essentially is that we don't want global leadership, and so there's a vacuum then becomes created. And he's done this in many ways, in his insults to NATO, in his compliments to a murderous leader in Saudi Arabia, and all kinds of things. In many ways, he's just saying, screw it. And so who fills the vacuum? And the EU under Mogherini is simply not. Henry Kissinger's question 30 years ago, I don't know the address of Europe, still is an interesting question, I would say. And so the EU, even though potentially would have it, it's not. And so then you have to look to China and to Russia, and as you look at the shifting sands structurally, then that's one of the reasons why I say that people in Kosovo need to really think, is the moment right now, or should we wait 2 years, 3 years? And then a final question is, and again, another political science kind of model, is that you can say in these, looking at the relationship to comparative and international politics, is that what causes what? Will, if you're unhappy with the current government and the current situation in Kosovo, if you think that the leadership isn't particularly good, can it be changed? Can you change it through internal processes? Or can it be changed perhaps if the external situation normalizes? And again, one other example, in Kosovo, in Croatia, from 1990 to 1998, a right-of-center party, the Croatian Democratic Union, dominated politics. I mean, President Tudjman was, without a doubt, had near dictatorial powers in it. And in 1998, Eastern Slavonia was returned to Croatian control, and they had elections a year and a half later, and the HDZ, or the Croatian Democratic Union, lost that election. And that became, now you can say, and I think that Croatian politics are not as normal as I would like, but nonetheless, things have transferred back. So when you look at that kind of structural issues, then what causes what? And I don't have any answer. I'm just saying is that it's important to think about all these dimensions as you go forward. That's all. Thank you.
Mark, before you go, can I just add some question? For you.
Beide.
I agree on the policies of Trump, but I'm curious to know what is your opinion about George Soros' position on
George
all of this?
Soros.
Exactly.
George Soros is a hero.
Well, let me ask the
Sorry.
question about changing borders between Kosovo and Serbia, because very well-respected figure, Serbian figure, Sonja Biserko, mentioned the names, and I think she is informed. Maybe not, I don't know. But I'm asking you. She literally said that this is George Soros' idea.
To change the borders.
Exactly. And I know that in many mediums, people are kind of afraid, hiding to mention this name. And I'm curious to know, what is your opinion about that?
He's also afraid.
Well, let me say, it's quite complicated, because I know Sonia. I've known Sonia for a long time. She was formerly on the board of AUK up until about a year or two ago. And she's one of the people in Serbia who has consistently maintained a kind of a principled, open, and what I would call a following kind of a socialist rhetoric. He wants me to be a communist, democratic approach. And
The question about Soros.
I know, so I'm unfamiliar. I haven't seen anything where Soros has said any of that. Soros is right now under tremendous attack. That some nutcase Trump supporters sent him a bomb to his house in Westchester County, and then 3 days after the funeral of the murder of 11 people in a synagogue in Pittsburgh, all of a sudden, once again, the Trump machine is bringing him up as a bad guy. And just to say, I don't know about this position, but I can say is that George Soros has played a tremendously constructive role throughout East Central Europe and in Russia in the period from 1989 until the present.
I've got some money years ago from him.
Yeah, no, he's.
I'm talking about this moment.
No, I would just worry that this is code, right? Because oftentimes this is, if someone's against something, they'll say, oh, this is the globalists behind this, right? Which is code for Jewish conspiracy.
So, other professors?
I would love to, if you have a citation, I would.
I do have citations, but I'm afraid to read because the citations from many mediums from the right wing of US. So.
Well, I mean,
But I trust Sonia Biserko, honestly, and she mentioned the names, and she is well known as a person who doesn't care, is not afraid of mentioning.
she's gotten a lot of Soros money too in her time. Oh, sure.
Well, I have other sources that my former colleague, Edirama, and used to be my friend, who was an artist, and is involved in this group, and Kushi. So basically, it seems that it's a triangle, like three people who are on the table against Kosovo. So we have just Sonia Biserko so far, which is in our side. It's paradoxical, it's crazy, but anyway. So these all have very close relation with the first force, and I know that for sure.
I'm not a fan of conspiracy theory. That's all I can say. But anyways, I mean, I'd love to see. Show me, no, but Jemmy, really, show me the site. I really have to go. So I'm late. My students will say I'm absent today if I could be late.
I would like to thank our professors for coming and thank you for following.